We are recording this webinar, so if you do lose connectivity at any point during the session, you'll be able to re-watch it in full at another time. Please be aware that you do have the option to have your camera switched on or off. Please feel free to select whichever you feel most comfortable with. If you, as I said earlier, if you have a question, you feel free to switch your microphone on, but if you would feel more comfortable, you can actually just pop that in the chat box and we can have a look at that for you. If you're using a desktop, the chat function can be found in the top corner, next to the leave button. And if you're using a mobile, it's just down the bottom, there'll be 3 dots and that's next to the leave button as well. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties throughout the webinar, let us know and we'll try and help you as quickly as possible. I have just let a few more people into the webinar, so let's get started. I would now like to introduce you to our host for the evening, Dr. Laura Williams, who has over 10 years experience working in child and adolescent mental health services in the NHS, and she also works for local charity Bright Pip and is a Hopscotch parent herself. We're very excited to have her here with us this evening. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Laura Williams.
Hello, hi. I'm just going to share my screen with you. So just bear with me because we've had a few technical issues already before we came on. So can you see that, Amelia?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I can see that.
Great. Brilliant. Okay, lovely. So everyone can see my screen. I unfortunately can't see everyone. I've just got a small picture of Amelia in the corner, which is lovely because she looks great. And thank you so much for that introduction, Amelia. You're right. I work for child and adolescent mental health services where mostly I see teenagers. But my passion is the work that I do for Bright Pip, which stands for Brighton Parent Infant Psychological Therapy. I have a passion for working with children under 5 and their families, and I'll say a bit more about Bright Pip later. But I think we've actually got quite a lot to cover today, so I'm just going to race through it. Since I can't see anything apart from you, Amelia, if people have got raising their hand while I'm talking, will you just stop me?
Yeah, I'll let you know. Yeah.
Okay. And apologies, I've got a bit of a croaky voice today and the light in here isn't very good. So I realise I look old and haggard, which is not usually the case, of course. Okay, so let's get started. So hang on. Hurdle is that it doesn't seem to be okay. Sorry, bear with me. Just going to stop sharing and try and reshare. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so today I'm going to aim to speak for about half an hour and that's going to be divided into 2 parts. So the first part, I'm going to just think with you about defining self-esteem together, and particularly defining self-esteem in the early years. The second part, we're going to think about my 5 top tips for growing children who feel good about themselves. So 5 things that you can be doing as parents. Then I'm going to cover where to go if you want more help, different kinds of help. And then we are going to have the opportunity, hopefully about 10-15 minutes for questions and answers. But before I start, I just want to do a bit of a disclaimer to say that I'm coming to you today with the assumption that you're doing a good enough job. and good enough sounds a bit dismissive, and it isn't meant to be. It's a reference to the good enough parent, which is a particular kind of psychological concept, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. But in the webinar, I do give suggestions about ways to promote self-esteem, and if you've been doing something different, it doesn't mean it's wrong or it's damaging. These are just ideas that I invite you to take or leave as you want to, and I invite you to adapt them to your style of parenting and your family. But I guess just to say that parenting is particularly tough and sensitive ground, and you know, we're all parents here, and we've also been babies and young children, so what I cover today might make you think about experiences past or present, and this can be quite emotionally evocative, and that's normal, really. So if you need to stop watching or go and make a cup of tea or stroke the dog or whatever, then that's absolutely fine with me. I can't see you anyway, so I wouldn't know. Okay, so part one is defining self-esteem together. So I just in the chat, and Amelia's going to help me with this, I just want you to I invite people to just write what comes to mind when you think about self-esteem in babies and young children, or if it's a more helpful question, what are your hopes or fears for your child with regard to self-esteem? And Amelia, can you just read them out as?
Yeah, I will do. Let me have a look in the box.
Thank you.
The first one we've had through is, oh, we've got a few. So someone has said confidence, resilience. I want them to feel confident and safe. Another one saying confidence. Willing to try anything.
Yeah, to try things, confidence, feeling of safety.
Yeah.
Resilience.
Happiness, strength. I want my children to be compassionate and kind. Another one, confidence and security in their feelings and ideas. Any other ones? So we've got in there at the moment.
So confidence, resilience, wanting children to be compassionate and kind, wanting children to be, in particular, confident to kind of try new things, do new things. Great. And the reason I ask is because I was in two minds about using the word self-esteem in this presentation because it's got a very specific meaning in the psychological literature. So, for example, the American Psychological Association defines it as the degree to which the qualities and characteristics contained in one's self-concept are perceived to be positive. So a sense of yourself as positive. And in particular, it being an important ingredient of mental health. Self-esteem is thought to be kind of part of the construct of personality. So that means that it's thought of as being kind of quite a stable thing across time. So children who are, or people who have high self-esteem in childhood tend to have it later on in life. Maslow, who was really famous for defining a hierarchy of our needs as human beings, said, you know, when it comes down to it, self-esteem is the answer to the question, am I a good, lovable, worthwhile person who deserves the respect and attention of others? And I wonder who's heard their baby or toddler ask themselves that question. I'm sure everyone's got very advanced children, but the answer, of course, is no one. No one's baby or toddler has asked themselves that question. And that's really important, a really important point, because babies and toddlers' sense of self, their self-worth, their self-esteem, really importantly, is under construction. It's developing live. And that's such an important thing to consider when we're thinking about growing children's self-esteem, is that it's not set, it's absolutely under construction. And the reason for that is because of the nature of infant brain development. I'm sure lots of people know that when babies are born, they're only born with sort of 50% of their brain connections, 50% of their brain is developed. And between 0 to 3 is a really rapid period of growth in terms of brain development. So there's about 1 million kind of connections, brain connections happening every second. That's the rate of growth. And brain development happens in a particular way. So it happens in the context of babies and toddlers' environments, and in particular in the context of their social relationships. And of course, those social relationships tend to be parental relationships. So the more experiences are repeated, the stronger those particular brain connections become. So for example, a baby cries because they're hungry, and mum or dad might feed them and at the same time say, "Oh, you're really hungry. Wait a minute, I'm just about to feed you. You'll be okay." And then a few months or a month or a few weeks later, the baby might be hungry and then cry. And this time, before they get fed, even just the sound of mum or dad saying, "I can hear you're hungry. I'm coming. I'm going as fast as I can," might start to soothe them, because that repeated experience has strengthened and strengthened. And a few months later, a bit like my baby, baby might be hungry, and maybe this time, because that experience and that expectation of being helped or of being fed is so strong, perhaps this time they might not cry, and like my baby, they might just look very intensely at the Tommy Tippy Perfect Prep machine and then back to me, communicating that they're hungry. So babies' brains develop in the context of those caregiver relationships and in the context of their environment. And those repeated experiences form the strongest, quickest connections in the brain. And amazingly, babies adapt their behaviour after only 4 weeks of being in the world. So that happens super quickly, and babies are super adaptable. Eventually, so many connections are formed that there's no room in the slot anymore, and there needs to be a period of tidying up, really. So the brain prunes itself. Those strong repeated connections remain, and the ones that aren't used very much, so the experiences that don't happen that often, those connections die off. And there is another period of reorganization in adolescence, similar. So this is really important. A lot of bit theory heavy, but it's really important to know, because in the early years, children don't have self-esteem in the way that, for example, an 8-year-old might, or a child in sort of primary age or middle childhood. It's in development, it's happening live according to their environment and the relationships they're in at this early stage. Okay. All right. So we've established that babies and children aren't going to tell you, "Mum or Dad, I've got low or high self-esteem." So how do you know if your child feels good about themselves? So in the chat, I'm just curious to hear how people know if their child feels good about themselves. Can you put your child or your children's ages, and what might you notice them doing or saying or showing that tells you that they're feeling good about themselves? And Amelia, you can read that out for me if that's okay.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, let me have a look.
Thank
you. So we've got Mummy Look, which is their child is 3. Smiling. 2 years old, dancing.
Yeah.
Age 3, smiling and singing. 2, laughing and singing. 4 and a half, wanting to try new things. 3, singing and dancing. Got one, 23 months, confident to be herself and take her time if she wants to. So they're coming in fast. I'm losing the one that I'm reading. Let me find it again. Oh, warming up or in new situations or diving in, but feeling okay to do either. 4 years, trying new things. A 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, singing, dancing, engaged, outgoing and involved. Read a couple more, there's quite a few. 16-month-old, laughing and trying to dance. 23 months, experimenting with talking and dancing and getting involved in what we and others are doing.
So lots of getting involved, lots of like socializing or diving in, lots and lots of singing and dancing, which is amazing. So really important. I guess we had lots of similar age children there, didn't we? Lots of 3 and 4-year-olds. Yeah, but smiling was another one as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So really important when we're thinking about, you know, how do you know if your child feels good about themselves? Again, this kind of brain development stuff is really important because children's development is so rapid at this age and stage. There's different, you know, knowing if your child feels good about themselves is absolutely dependent on their age and stage. You have to know what age and stage they are to understand if they feel good about themselves. So for example, 2-year-olds, you know, if the amount of crying, screaming, biting, hitting, pushing, like Jekyll and Hyde stuff that a 2-year-old does is developmentally normal and healthy, and is absolutely not a sign that they're not feeling good about themselves, because it's one of the tasks of toddlerhood. You know, if you had a 10-year-old doing that, then that would have a different meaning. Similarly, and it sounds like dancing, singing, and getting involved in social activities are ways of knowing that your younger child, your sort of older toddler, is feeling good about themselves. And that certainly fits with age and stage of sort of 3 upwards, your older toddler, because peer relationships start to be really important. So if you've got an older, sorry, that was a fly. If you've got an older child who's getting involved in peer relationships, and who's kind of confident to make friends, it might be confident in a group or it might be more confident on a one-to-one basis, then again, that fits with their age and stage. Babies, we can tend to tell that they're feeling good about themselves by thinking about eye contact. So if babies are looking at you, doing lots of looking right in your eyes, lots of gazing, lots of smiling at the same time as gazing, and if babies have a relaxed body as opposed to a very tense body, that's a good sign that they're kind of feeling good about themselves too. But the take-home point really is that age and stage is really important when you're thinking about whether there's a problem or not, whether they feel good about themselves. Whoops, sorry. And lastly, before we go on to the second part, how does self-esteem happen? You know, we know it's in development at this age, but what's the theory about how it happens? And generally, psychological theories agree that experiences in life shape how you feel about yourself, and that these interact with innate factors like temperament. So if you're... Here's what I found. Oh,
sorry, that was my theory.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Worries. Yeah, innate factors like temperament. So if you've got, you know, a shyer child or a more outgoing child, for example, that will interact with the experiences that they have. In the early years, these experiences, as I said, tend to be relationships with others, and they tend to be relationships with their primary caregivers. And these relationships with mum or dad or whoever is primary caregiver provide like a template for children's relationships to themselves, the world and others. So child is learning about themselves through their relationship to their mum or dad, learns what to expect from others and learns what to expect from themselves, and tends to take that learning like a template or a blueprint into relationships in later life. And I said that the first 3 years are a particularly significant period of growth and change. And I've put, this is it's a pretty cheesy metaphor, to be honest with you, the metaphor of this kind of growing flower. But if you can set that aside, I think it's a helpful one. So if we think about the kind of full sunflower as being, you know, self-esteem that's kind of developed and can be measured, I guess, by questionnaire or whatever, around middle childhood, say age 8, you can see about all the groundwork and all the growth that goes before that. And you can see that there are certain conditions that are required to be able to grow self-esteem. So, for example, it needs to be rooted in a stable place, soil, with enough nutrients to grow. So the stability of home and family environment. And research tells us that warm, sensitive and responsive parenting are the best conditions for growing positive self-esteem in children. And if there are 2 parents at home, then a positive parental relationship, or if parents are separated, then good co-parenting, positive co-parenting relationship. It needs water and sunlight, so positive social relationships like peer relationships, and, you know, enough learning opportunities, getting out and about, having stimulation. And even though, you know, even though that might give this flower the kind of best conditions to grow in, and it might flourish, inevitably there's going to be frost, storms, bugs, drought, adversity. And these absolutely do affect self-esteem. Life events, you know, research says life events such as particularly things like growing up in poverty has a huge impact on children's self-esteem, but experience, you know, children's particular experience of the academic demands of the school and school life, you know, does the way that they learn fit with the way that they're taught, illness and disability, loss or bereavement, bullying, but there is much research to say that even those experiences of adversity, if a child has had an experience of you know, warm, sensitive parenting and a stable home life, what's called a secure attachment to their parents, this builds resilience. So people were talking about resilience earlier. This builds resilience, and those children are more able to bounce back from those adverse experiences. Even more fascinating is that children who've had that secure attachment to caregivers, you know, that sensitive, responsive parenting, stable family life, that can even help to prevent adversity. So there's lots of research about the link between having a secure attachment to parents and the impact on immunity. So a strengthened immune system, which of course later means that you know, diseases of inflammation or health problems might be, those children might be less impacted by. Okay, so I guess my take-home point from that is it's not to say that you know, heap on the pressure and say it's all on you as parents, but you play a big role, and hence why I'm focusing in the second part of my webinar on things that you can do as parents to grow self-esteem. Should we stop and ask if there's any questions at this point?
Yeah, we could do anything.
So have you used the raise hand function if anyone's got any questions?
a look. Or you can pop them in the chat box as well, and I'll check in there.
Because we are quite behind, Amelia, aren't we?
We could do, yeah, we could do, if we take a few questions off the first part, and then we can do the second part, and we might have time just for a few after that. Let me double check the chat box, see if there's anything in there. Can't see any raised hands. There's someone asking if the webinar is going to be recorded, and it is being recorded. We're going to try and get that up on the website as soon as possible after this evening. So if you missed the first part, you'll be able to rewatch that. Did anyone have any questions off of the back of the first part of? So we've had another question. Our daughter has got a rare ear condition. How can we help with her self-esteem?
I guess I would say let's. I hope to answer that in the second part of the webinar. So I've got some tips about how you can help with self-esteem, but I'm also mindful that, you know, they're general tips, and if your child has a particular condition, then that's going to affect them in a certain way. You know, might be affecting her, how able she is to be involved in social interactions, and so let's do the second half of the webinar and see if that helps. And I'm sorry that I can't kind of say a bit more or speak to that anymore here. Shall we move on?
That sounds good. It might answer a few questions that people have off.
I hope so. There's some general tips. Yeah. All right, great. Let's go. Okay, part 2, growing children who feel good about themselves. So 5 top tips. I think I am going to really have to whiz through. So stop waffling.
Super speedy 5 top tips.
Super speedy. Right. This is number 1 because this is my favourite, and I think it's the most important. Okay, the power of paying attention. And there's a quote here. So your attention to everything she does and everything she says acts like a magnet that draws together the fragments of her personality, a magnet drawing together iron filings. And I totally love this quote by Esteem, who was one of the first child psychoanalysts. For me, it really conjures up an image of the role of parental attention in the development of children's sense of self. So, for example, another psychoanalyst, Dilys Dawes, gave a kind of similar analogy, talked about parental attention being analogous to physical care. So like you would hold your baby, in psychological terms, attention is like holding your baby or holding your child, and that the more you do it, the more you hold your child in your attention, this develops what she calls a kind of psychic skin. So like we have a skin holding our organs together, it keeps us together, it keeps us as one person. Parental attention, again and again and again, develops a child's psychic skin. So children are held together. So eventually, you know, they learn to hold themselves together. If something happens, if something difficult happens, they don't fall apart. That's the power and the greatness of parental attention. That's what you're doing when you're paying attention to your child. And they're the psychoanalysts, but don't just take it from them, because your full attention is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to your child, I think. Attention is, I'm sure you've all experienced, highly motivating and reinforcing for children. The phrase she or he is attention seeking being a common one, because attention is everything. And attention is the basis of evidence-based behaviour management techniques as well. You know, praise and ignoring are 2 techniques that we're all familiar with, and they're highly evidence-based and in every kind of parenting program that you can think of, because of the power of attention. Okay. So attention doesn't have to be all singing and all dancing, and you don't have to be even directly involved, and you don't have to be, you know, your child may not be interacting with you at all. Okay, so consider the image, this sweet image of a dad and his little girl, and dad is giving her his full attention, and we can see that because of his eye contact and because of his stance. And his daughter's not facing him, but I think that she knows that he's there. And her delight, from my perspective, her delight and pride about what she's achieving here is amplified by knowing that he's there. So if he wasn't in the picture, I just don't think that she would look the same. And I just invite you to consider what this little girl is learning about herself from this interaction with dad, or from dad's attention here. I think that she's learning I'm an important person, and I think that she's learning it, you know, if I need help or if I fall, my dad's going to be there for me. And thinking back to the brain development stuff, you know, if these sorts of experiences are repeated and repeated, that little girl is going to take that forward as her template into later childhood and indeed adulthood. You know, you might find that because she's had an experience of feeling important or knowing that she's going to be helped, she might be a child who, you know, is fine with raising her hand in the classroom, and that might mean she gets more out of that environment, learns better, feels more confident, gets more actively involved, and you can see how that continues to be reinforcing and reinforcing. I think the other benefit of attention is for you as parents. So attention, paying attention to your child and just freeing yourself up to observe them means that you might learn something about them. So you might learn, you know, who is my child, and is this different to my expectation of them or my hope for them? Where's my child at? What are they doing at the moment? What can't they do at the moment? What are they drawn to? And what does this tell me about the person that they are? And how can I support them with that? So benefits both parent and child. Okay, number 2. Praise is great, but I'm sure we've all heard ourselves say, well done, that's really great, in this kind of like slightly forced, high-pitched, well done you way. And that's absolutely fine to do. I do it all the time. But if you really want more bang for your buck with praise, if you really want to make it powerful, it needs to be authentic. So I would say steer clear from praising if you really don't feel like it. If you're really proud or something surprises you about your child, you're pleased, you're amazed, or they're doing something that you really hope for them to do, or you're working on. So in this house, it's sibling relationships. If I see a cuddle or something even remotely kind, I'm praising it and I'm really pleased about it. So it needs to be authentic. It's particularly important in the early years that praise is authentic because, again, it's all about the brain. Because language is really, you know, is either not developed or it's very immature in the early years, the brain prioritizes information that's non-verbal. So the brain is prioritizing information like touch, eye contact, tone of voice, facial expression. That's the stuff that's really prioritized, and language is not so prioritized. And that means that children are much better than adults at knowing if something is authentic. And if there's an incongruence between what they're feeling or what they're picking up from you and what you're saying, then it's not going to make much impact. Okay, it's also handy if praise is specific. So like we were talking about, you know, observing your child, you might be noticing that they're really into something in particular, or that they've actually got a particular skill. You know, they might be a really focused child and their concentration is amazing. So if you can say, you know, wow, you're concentrating really amazingly there, or well done for being so gentle with your brother, then that can help in terms of developing their sense of self, in terms of what their unique skills are. They start to kind of learn, you know, this is the person I am. This is what I'm good at, as opposed to other people. Even better, share the impact of your child's behaviour on you. Young children are absolutely fascinated by the impact they have on others, because they're in the process of realising and developing or becoming their own person. You know, newborn babies don't realise they're a separate person. That's part of early years development. So they're totally fascinated by what's you and what's me and what impact can I have on you. So if you are, you know, if you are sharing the impact on you, so rather than just saying, you know, well done for being so gentle, you could say, you know, if you feel it, Mummy's so proud of you. Mummy's so proud of you for being so gentle and loving. I saw that and I just felt so, you know, so not moved, because that's not a toddler word, but so proud of you. Then that creates absolute fireworks in the brain. You know, you've got your eye contact, maybe you're giving them a cuddle, you're using your words at the same time, and as far as your baby or toddler is concerned, all of these things are making sense. They're all telling them, you know, you are a gentle person, you're a wonderful person, you're a lovable person, and you're a worthwhile person. And that just creates an explosion of positive, of kind of good neurochemicals in the brain. And that's good because it makes them feel good and it makes you feel good. But it also, those kind of release of neurochemicals promotes brain growth as well. So at that time, you'll have a kind of mega dose of self-esteem and a mega dose of growth in your child feeling that way about themselves, or of developing their sense of self. Using this approach with negative emotions is also helpful if we're thinking about self-esteem. So, for example, that banging is really annoying me. So sharing the impact on you. Don't hit mummy, it hurt me. Sharing the impact on you. Or for a younger baby, you know, if they're pulling your hair, you might just kind of firmly guide their hand away from your hair and say no, or shake your head, or kind of frown a bit. And I think that this is equally as important, because children are learning that you accept all of them. You accept when they're kind and they're gentle, and that side of them, but there's another part of them that can be aggressive or can be annoying, and you also accept that side of them. And in that way, they are learning to integrate all of these different parts of themselves together and be okay with that. I think it's also important because children are learning boundaries from you. When you tell them, you know, not to pull your hair or not to hit you because it hurts, that comes from a place of self-respect and self-worth. You know, being able to assert yourself like that, you're teaching them it's okay if something crosses the boundary. If someone hurts you, it's okay to say no. That comes from a place of self-respect. So they're learning self-respect and self-esteem from you too. Okay, racing on. Number 3, child-led play. You be Elsa and I'll be Anna. So having fun together is really important, but play isn't just about fun. It serves so many different important functions. So when we play, we learn to explore, focus, concentrate, take turns, imagine, create, practice and master new skills, and learn about and process our emotions. So play is hugely important experience for young children. So for example, peekaboo isn't just fun. It's also a way of practicing separation with the parent at a time where this is becoming developmentally challenging for a baby. So from about 9 months, you see separation anxiety, and that's related to the development of the realization that something exists even if the baby can't see it, and that creates anxiety. And peekaboo is a way of practicing managing the anxiety about that. So, you know, will my parents still be there waiting for me or when I take my hands away? And, you know, letting your child lead the play rather than you directing it really really ensures and gives them the opportunity to use that play in the way that they need it at that time, according to, you know, the developmental tasks that they're undertaking or the experience they've had that day or whatever. So, for example, my toddler was scared to go to sleep because someone who will remain nameless tested the fire alarm during their nap. And in the days afterwards, he played at putting his teddies to bed, and then he played at going to sleep, pretending to go to sleep. And then he went into his room and shut the door and pretended to go to sleep and insisted I was on the other side of the door. And he repeated it and repeated it and repeated it and repeated it and repeated it. And then his anxiety eventually reduced. So a good example of the ways that children use play to manage developmental tasks or anxiety or whatever is going on for them. But child-led play is a phrase that's kind of trotted out, and I think it's easier said than done. So just thinking about what we mean or how to do it, you know, what we mean by child-led play and how to do it. So watch your child play for a start, you know, going back to that idea of attention and observation. You'll get new ideas from them. You'll also notice how they like to, or how they prefer to involve you. For kind of older toddlers, I think it can be helpful to make a regular special playtime with your child and kind of call it something like that, with a beginning and an end. And in my experience as a psychologist, if you're able to do that for, say, 20 minutes of kind of focused child-led play a day, A, you're doing really well, and B, in my experience, children begin to learn that they can count on that time, and that often means that they're happier to do some independent play at other times. So that's an incentive. Let your child lead. Okay, what does that mean? It means wait for your child to make the first move. So you be Elsa and I'll be Anna, and parent could say, hi Elsa, I'm Anna. It's often referred to as kind of child-led play is often referred to as a dance, or as being a bit like a tennis game of serve and return. Always child serves first, and whatever they serve you, you need to volley it back. So you've got to wait and see what they serve you, and based on what they serve you, you respond. Okay. Minimizing questions and suggestions. So really resist the urge to say things like, why don't you do it like this, or what's that, or why, or asking lots of questions, because that can interrupt the process of the play. Instead, you could make comments. So just describe what you're seeing, like, oh, it's going really high, or oh dear, monkey looks a bit cross, or yeah, it's about the process rather than the end point. And accept all play within safe limits. So it won't always look how you want or how you imagined. There might be aggression, there might be a lot of repetition, there might be mess, silliness, they might be unproductive or lose focus. It may not go well according to you. You know, you may feel rejected by trying to get involved. You might feel awkward, silly, you might feel a failure, you might feel bored, and that's all okay and common. Just give yourself permission to notice how it goes, notice how you feel, to notice how your child is after the play, what impact did it have on them. And if it's too hard, then ask for help, get other family members involved, or we'll be thinking a bit more about help later on. But just in spite of all the long list of things that I've just described, don't think too much about it, just go with it. If you approach the play with observation and curiosity, the rest should come, hopefully. I know, I'm really sorry, Amelia, we're really late. Let me do these two super quickly. Okay. Yeah. The fourth is rupture and repair. So as we were just talking about, things don't always go well between you and your child, and that's normal. Okay, so times where things don't go well and you get out of sync with your child, we think about as being a rupture. And ruptures happen frequently when one person kind of misses the other. And it's normal and inevitable part of human relationships. Okay, Donald Winnicott, who was a psychoanalyst and paediatrician, coined the phrase the good enough parent, to think about ruptures being, you know, not just inevitable, but actually important in child development. So when you don't respond to your child straight away, or when you don't anticipate their needs, or when you get it wrong, that's not just inevitable, it's important, because the child has a small enough experience of anxiety or confusion or frustration to help them to learn to tolerate that feeling inside them and to eventually to cope with it themselves. Okay, so the rupture isn't the issue, it's the repair. Here's a topical example of a rupture. It's Kate Middleton and Prince Louis at the Jubilee, and she's smiling, but really she's thinking face the front and sit still, because he's just pulled her hair and put his hand over her mouth, because he just wants to be up dancing and he needs to sit still. Other examples of ruptures might be if your child rejects your idea or comment during play. Perhaps you're having a nice game of peekaboo with your baby and they just look away, and you might think that they're bored, but really they're just taking time out to process that interaction. But yeah, really what's important is the repair. And here's the repair with Louis and Kate. She's looking more relaxed. He's like, hooray, mum's let herself go. And we're now enjoying the Jubilee. And what makes a healthy repair? So noticing that something's gone wrong or that something's happened between you and your child, acknowledging it. So, oh, okay, you didn't like that when I said that. Right, you didn't like it. And telling the story of what happened, like, okay, I said that and then you got annoyed and then you threw something or you hit your brother, and that's why mummy shouted, because that's not acceptable. And then making it right. So parents have a range of ways of making it right, that could be having a cuddle, switching pace, calming things down, or saying sorry. I think the key is avoid lengthy silent treatment or going cold or withdrawing or withholding cuddles. Okay, so that's rupture and repair. And my last top tip is really about parental mental health and relationships, because we do know that can have a significant impact. So parental mental health difficulties or conflict in relationship between parents can have a big impact on children's self-esteem and well-being. And there's a lovely illustration by the Psychology Mum about just some of the ways becoming a new parent can impact on your mental health. So it can leave you feeling anxious, low. You might find you're lacking delight in or enjoyment in your child, feel like a failure, a bad mum or dad. You might be spending more time at work to avoid your children. You might be drinking more, feeling very angry or resentful towards them. It's all common. It might take a toll on your relationship. You might feel pushed out or like you have nothing to give, unattractive. The birth may have had an impact on your sex life. You may feel forgotten, your identity might be lost. Again, all of it is common. And I guess my top tip would be, if you're feeling any of those things, then tell someone and see if it makes a difference. So partner, friend, therapist, GP, family member, personal trainer, health visitor. And if that doesn't make a difference, it doesn't make you feel better, then you can get help. There is help out there. And that's my last slide, is about where to get more help and information. So if you want sort of more information on some of the things I've covered, there's a bit more on brain development on YouTube by Harvard University, or if you want a really dense theory, research heavy read, but which is very interesting, you could read Why Love Matters by Sue Kerhart. There's a couple of links there which perhaps you can make available to people, Amelia. The Understanding Childhood series is an amazing series of leaflets on kind of common issues in under 5. So like sleep, feeding, sibling relationships, challenging behaviour. They've got some really good advice leaflets. For more about the research that I've discussed, you can go to the Parent Infant Foundation. And to speak to someone, you can approach your health visitor to speak to someone if you're worried about your child, or you're wanting help with your own mental health or parental relationship. Health visitor, or Mothers Uncovered is a group in Brighton, which is a kind of creative group of mums that get together and do creative writing about, share their experiences of motherhood. Mummy Shock is a therapeutic group that runs in Brighton. The Brighton and Hove Wellbeing Service is for adults, it's an adult psychology service. And Bright Pip is a charity for parents who are either pregnant or have a child up to 3rd birthday. And you can access our service either privately by going to the website and contacting us, or via your health visitor. We currently offer 3 sessions free online, and they can be about anything from, you know, I don't feel a bond with my baby, to I'm really struggling with my baby's sleep, or I don't know what to do about my toddler's behaviour, or I'm just not enjoying them that much, or I feel really not very confident as a parent about this age and stage. Any of those things, you can ask your health visitor to refer you to Bright Pip. Or if you have a social worker, you can ask your social worker to refer you. And that's it. And I've gone like basically double over time. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. That was brilliant.
I'm so sorry.
No, not at all. It was so interesting. I think it needed the time that it needed. I think, I'm not sure if we'll have too much time for questions now. The meeting's going to end in about 5 minutes. We have had a few in the chat box, so maybe if I just read out one. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Is feeling self-conscious and low self-esteem the same thing?
I would say it's not the same thing. I think probably feeling self-conscious is maybe it depends what you're feeling self-conscious about, but it's maybe part of how you see yourself as a person. Because I guess if we're thinking about self-esteem as like the extent to which you see yourself as a good person, I'd be curious about what being self-conscious is about. Like, is it about body, or is it about feeling self-conscious about talking? And I think they're not the same thing. I think you can have high self-esteem and still be self-conscious, or maybe a bit shy, or whatever. Okay,
thank you. I think unfortunately that's all we're going to have time for.
Sorry.
No, not at all. We got some questions in the middle as well. Yeah. I just want to say thank you again for hosting that session. I think everyone will agree that it's been fantastic learning from your breadth of knowledge. I just quickly wanted to go through a couple of things before we end the session. Everyone will be receiving an email from us after the session is finished this evening, which I can pop the PowerPoint slides in, which will have all those contact details that you went through at the end. And the email will also have a feedback survey in. It'd be fantastic if you could fill this out for us, because it will help us with our future webinars and topics that we can cover, things that you're interested in seeing in the future. It's a really short survey, so it'll only take a minute or two. And also, If you would like to keep up to date with our future events and what's going on in all the nurseries, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Hopscotch Nurseries. I just want to say thank you again, Laura. That was brilliant.
Were there lots of unanswered questions or not?
There weren't too many. No, there was a couple left in the chat box.
Okay, so you can always email them to me if you like, and I'm happy to, if that's easy to do, because if you know who the person was that.
Yep, I should be able to do that. Yep. What I'll do is I'll go through at the end of the session and I'll look at the chat box, and then I can pass your questions on to Laura, and then we'll send you a response afterwards.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay.
Right. Thanks for your help, Amelia, and thank you for everyone for tuning in.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope everyone has a lovely evening.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.